Could you be participating in a religious cult and you don't even know it? Today, we're going to be talking about the top 10 cults.
Oh, Mike's got something to say. You think I'm bad. All right, so we have been noticing a trend. And we're going to talk about it today. The top 10 cults.
They're everywhere.
And we want to bring it to light and have a little discussion about it.
Yep, almost everyone is affected. Well, pretty much probably everyone is affected.
Yeah, pretty much everybody. Yep. First of all, the definition of a cult is?
As you know, a religious cult is something that you follow without any evidence or without reasonable evidence, and you will die for that message even though you have no proof. And if somebody contradicts you about it, you just get very upset and angry.
Even when the evidence is presented to you.
Yes.
Yep.
So.
Okay, we just wanted to say real quick, the reason why we're talking about this is because we are noticing that people are focusing on these cults instead of focusing on the things that they need to be focusing on, like getting their family ready, taking care of their family, and...
It's taking over your life.
Yeah, and getting their debt paid off. And when you're focusing on these things, you cannot focus on the things that matter. All right, number one.
Veganism.
Oh!
Didn't see that coming, did you?
Yeah, I did.
Man, what we've realized is there's nothing wrong with eating vegetables, but people they're cutthroat about veganism. If you're vegan,
let's put it this way: vegan/organic needs to kind of be together in this category.
Right. Most people that bring up vegan things with us, they will say, I'm a vegan, so blah, blah, blah. What that means is everyone turn toward me and acknowledge that I'm a vegan. I've got this mission and it's an important thing to me. And if you say something that disagrees with that, normally they will attack you viciously. And whole groups of vegans will come after you.
And people who are into organics.
Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with not eating meat, but the thing is, when you're vicious about it and it becomes the whole center point of your life, it's everything that you're about, and it's the kind of thing they would put on your tombstone because it's the most important thing to you, it's a cult.
Yeah, and if you have to comment about it on pretty much anybody who isn't a vegan or who doesn't eat organic foods, that's ridiculous.
It's a cult.
There's absolutely no proof that eating organic will extend your life. First of all, why do you want to extend your life? I mean, really, past 90 years old, you don't really have very good quality of life anyway. So, first of all, why would you want to live to be 120 in the first place? Secondly, I was born with 11 grandparents who all ate food that was sprayed with chemicals, processed food, macaroni and cheese. Macaroni and cheese.
Part of the issue with all that is, what are chemicals? You know, people will they'll say, oh, this is all natural food. Well, you go through the list and it's like natural ingredients and artificial ingredients. Because there are ones that specifically are named, like sugar and dextrose and poly or whatever. Yep. But then you get to natural ingredients and artificial ingredients. They all have strange chemical names, but some are called natural, and they're okay to eat in your organic food that you get at Trader Joe's. But other things are not okay, but they have the same kinds of things. The thing is, chemicals themselves are just part of nature.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean all chemicals are bad. Do I think you should drink poison? No. But do I think that margarine is poison? No.
No.
So
and it's not even one step from poison either. This was the big thing, 10 years ago or something, is that margarine's going to kill you because it's one step away from plastic. How absolutely, utterly ridiculous. And for those of you who are just so anti-chemical on everything, I'm sorry, you shouldn't be driving a car then. You shouldn't. You should be walking and riding a bike wherever you go.
Shouldn't be drinking water. Water's a chemical.
So anyway, that's number one. Next one is...
The next one is climate and environment.
Oh!
What? I said it. All right, so I don't care what you believe about what's going on in the world climate-wise. What I do think is that there is science, and people who say follow the science or believe the science, they don't really care about the science or know what the science is or understand how science works.
So I found a chart, and here's this chart. And if you will note, the temperature fluctuates up and down. This is not the first time we have had high temperatures and drought conditions. There's this thing called the Dust Bowl that happened almost 100 years ago. Guess what? It was the same conditions as now.
Well, and I'm not here to debate, does it get warmer, does it get colder? I mean, it does. It does get warmer and does it get colder? The thing is, the determination of why that happens is something that's kind of beyond us, really. But the thought that we are most likely doing it,
it's pretty arrogant.
It's pretty arrogant. So I saw a thing the other day, it said in Antarctica, there's this ice sheet under the water that they're afraid it's going to break off and cause a big disaster because the changing. But they said the last time this happened, it was like 10 or 20,000 years ago, according to their story. It all melted and then it caused this big disaster. And I was thinking, so it changed. There was warming back then that caused this to happen.
There was no humans
But
back then
nobody was
this.
doing factories. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm not saying that it's not bad for factories to pollute. Like we want to keep the air as clean as we can and stuff like that. But the thing is, if you have to go crazy about it and argue about it and make it part of your life, and while you're going and buying your foam cups, talk about, the environment and how we have to do all these things to save it, or while you're driving any kind of a car, including an electric car, to say, oh, well, we need to stop doing that. Well, the thing is, even the electric cars, there's putting stuff out there. If it becomes a centerpiece of your life, and whenever anyone mentions something about it, you have to get really aggressive about it. If you go stand in front of buildings and glue yourself to things and set yourself on fire and do stuff like that, it is a dangerous, dangerous cult.
Those people need Jesus.
And the thing is that, again, these things don't have really, people say, well, the scientists know. And I'll say, well, what science are you talking about? And people will say, well, the experts say. Oh, so anytime you don't know the answer and you say the experts say, it means that you don't really know what the evidence is. And so you're just following it blindly. So it's your religious cult. That is your religion, and It is a cult.
And I would just like to say, at least make sure when you make these statements like 10,000 years ago this happened before, that when you're making these statements, they actually make sense. There were no humans back then to cause it to happen 10,000 years ago, supposedly. So how would humans be doing it now? It doesn't make sense.
Well, and when you hear something about science, it's fine if you want to believe whatever you want to believe on that. But the thing is, you should know why you believe it. I noticed, I used to work in college, in a university, and I noticed that sometimes the professors would have a point, and maybe it was a valid point, but they would take evidence and twist it, even though the evidence didn't really say, so that it would make their point more valid. You should go out, if it's important enough to you to really make it a big deal, and you have to go post some nasty message on somebody else's YouTube channel or Facebook, then you should at least know what the evidence is. Not refer to somebody, not to say, go get an expert. Well, how do you know that person's an expert? They're not smarter than you. They're human beings and they make mistakes. All of us make mistakes. So if you just follow that, you're following blindly. It's a religious cult. And if you say, I believe in God, and you don't have any reason for it, at least people understand where you're coming from. But if you say, follow the science is a fact, but then you don't actually know what the science is, you don't understand how science works, and you just refer to somebody else that you think is an expert because CNN told you they're an expert, then you're following a cult. You are in a cult.
All right, the next one is going to be a big one, and oh boy, we're going to get backlash for this one.
Healthcare.
/ that thing going around that starts with a C.
We'll start with that thing going around. Okay, so the news started talking about 10 years before, oh, look, this thing is going to maybe be coming. This thing is maybe going to be coming. And then all of a sudden this thing came. And some people started getting sick, and everybody said it was going to be the end of the world and it was going to be a giant plague.
Millions and millions of people were going to die.
And so, like other people, we said, this could be a concern. Maybe we should be thoughtful about this. Kind of went along with it for a little while. But there's a certain point where science means evidence, means that it needs evidence. And if it were a situation like in the 1400s where an entire village would just die, then science would say, this is ultra dangerous. This is really dangerous for many, many people. But in this case, it was just a lot of people saying things. But when we heard things about the science, did any of us really know what the details were that they were talking about? I mean,
I did. Do you know why? Because as soon as it happened, the 2-week mark in March of 2020, I started typing in the C word, deaths, in my state and US. And I was watching the chart. And guess what? It really wasn't that bad. And surprisingly, when you typed in the flu deaths chart, it was a straight line.
now the thing is, clearly there was a sickness going around. People got sick.
And we're not, if you had someone die from this, we are not belittling that. If you got sick from it, we've had it 3 or 4 times now. We are not belittling that. But the same thing would have happened with the flu, okay?
But the point that I was trying to make on that is, yes, some people got sick. And yes, it was worse for vulnerable people, people that already have health conditions. It was worse for them. But so many things that were said were complete fiction. Complete fiction. Like, and when people say follow the science, almost exclusively, that is the clue that there is no science in what they're saying. Because you say, well, scientists know better, so you need to go talk to so-and-so because he's smarter. No, you need to know why you believe what you believe. Because things like coverings to cover your face and stuff like that, people say, oh yeah, well that keeps the load down. Okay, maybe it does. And I think there's some reason to think that to some degree that may be true. But how much is that? And how has it been proven? What is the evidence? It's fine for you to say, I think it's true, they say it's true, but to get vicious with people and attack people and basically
put them in jail. There are doctors who have been put in jail.
And throw all your friends under the bus and go online and become just a hateful person, that's a cult. Okay, and now, as a person who's not real fond of the direction all that went, I do have to say, it can go the other way. You can make your entire life about how you don't agree with it and there's nothing proven and everything else. And I tend to think that that's closer to true, but the reality is it did hurt some people. It hurt a lot of people. But we're not totally sure, because a lot of it's been so confused and misreported that who knows what the actual situation was.
Nobody actually was looking at the facts. And I find it interesting. Look at this chart here. I just looked this up yesterday, and it absolutely ticks me off. The CDC has now released no masks are needed, no things in the arm are needed. Kids can go to school if they have it. It's just fine. I can't remember what the 4th one was. But look at this chart here. The same time last year, where they were mandating all of these things, it is higher now than it was last year. And now we're taking away all these things? And in case you're wondering how this chart reads, the dotted lines are daily numbers, and the blue line is a 7-day average. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Now, of course, that's a big one. And the reason why it's really dangerous as a cult is that it completely stopped the entire world.
Ruined people's lives.
And ruined people's lives and caused more death and mayhem than it's saved. And what's interesting too is reporting on numbers. If you actually go look at the science, the actual numbers, a lot of the reporting, I saw Bill Gates talk about it the other day. He was reporting this number and I was like, what? Well, this other number I saw was lower. So I went to look at the number and I realized there's a whole bunch of unknown things. Like, they don't know. More people died than they expected in a year. But they, according to what the coroners said, it was not that. But he just decided, and a lot of other people just decided, if we don't know what it is, we're going to call it that. That's a cult. Yeah. It's a cult when you don't have evidence, but you make assertions and then you hammer people with that and you get upset at them. And like I said, you leave your family and friends and make all kinds of mess everywhere.
Okay, so this has a curse word in it, but we have to leave the curse word in, otherwise it doesn't quite have the effect that it does. But tell them the story about when that thing going around, the first week it hit and all the toilet paper was gone and you went to the grocery store. So Mike was friends with all the grocery store people, and one lady was an immigrant from Russia. Okay?
She actually said, I grew up in Soviet Union. She said, this is a conspiracy. this is a sickness. It's not causing everybody to go have the shits all the time. So she said, it's just a cult. It's a cult. It's just like the Soviet Union. And that's why I left that place, and I don't want this place like that. I was just thinking, that is so,
Yep.
that
You're
is
right.
so funny, but also so sadly
So
true.
true.
Now, the same thing,
With healthcare.
yeah.
Oh,
Healthcare in general has really become a cult too. Honestly, if we think about it, people lived and died in the past. And it's unfortunate that they died. And it's great that we have figured out through science a lot of ways to help people not die as frequently as they did before. But it's an illusion to think that we can control everything. When one of our, I think it was when our first child was born, we were talking to the doctor about an issue, and eventually the doctor said, well, we really don't know. We think if we do this, then this usually happens, but we really don't know. And we came to realize
that's pretty much all of it.
medicine is largely sort of educated guessing. And it's not that doctors don't usually fix you. They can if they're sewing up something, but what they're doing is they're enabling your body to do what it does naturally because of how it was made. Mm-hmm. Well, when the whole thing came up about affordable care, I remember people would get violent about it. People would fight each other and they'd be really awful. And I remember being very unhappy because we spent a lot of years getting to the point where we could afford it. But once the affordable went through, suddenly
Thank you, Obama.
our price
Appreciate
went
it.
up. Our out-of-pocket price, if we didn't get any care, went up 3 times. But if we actually wanted care, it was more like 5 to 10 times.
Yeah, it was like 10 times.
And because the deductibles were so high that it would have cost us.
We could not get treatment until we paid $1,500 a month and $9,000 per person per year. And we had 6 people in our family. And for those of you not in the United States who have national health care, you are paying for it. You may think it's free, but you're delusioned thinking it's free. It is not free. It is coming out of your taxes and higher prices. That's why you have higher prices.
Yeah, when you say, I can't believe your prices are so cheap in America, I can't believe your gas is so cheap in America, even when
That's
you're
why.
complaining that it's high, it's expensive for you because those things are built in, but they do it in a way to try to confuse you so you don't see the connection between your taxes and your medical
So
expenses.
you think you're getting it for free, and you're not. And that is a delusion. And that's a cult when you rely on your national health care.
As your life, as your salvation.
Yes.
That's the thing is, so during that time when they were talking about it here in the United States, I remember people were very vicious on both sides. And because some were like, we deserve this. And man, deserve, that's the absolute
That's how you know.
most hateful, evil word ever. I deserve something. When you're saying you deserve something, that's where it becomes a problem. But at the same time, I remember thinking, okay, well, wow, we were able to afford it. Now they tinkered and messed around with the system because other people said they deserve something, and now we can't afford it anymore. They've knocked us off for the hard work that we've done to get to this place of being able to afford it. And I was very upset about it. And I remember really being very angry about it for a lot. And finally I realized, whoa, this is a cult. And I'm falling into it because now I'm upset about it and thinking about all that. And I realized people have lived and died since the beginning. And spending 100% of everybody's money so that you don't have to pay cash when you go to the doctor, it's a cult.
All right, this next one is going to get us into trouble also, but the whole rainbow, how do we say it without getting knocked off of YouTube? Two people falling in love, it doesn't matter who you love. You can marry anyone, even if it's the same sex.
All kinds of gender things.
Men
and
can become women, and that's okay.
how do
Men
I
can have babies.
Yeah, how do I feel about who I am? Okay. Now, first of all, when we were younger, some people did things. We didn't necessarily agree with them, but everybody was pretty much of the most people were pretty much of the mindset that I don't really care what they do. I'm not going to be part of it. I'm not going to promote it. But now it's gotten to where some people want to do things, and you have to celebrate it.
Yep.
And you have to raise your hands and say, isn't it wonderful? And you have to go out of your way to do that.
Yep.
And like I said, when we were younger, some people did stuff like that. Other people were like, I don't know, I agree with that, but it's not happening in my life, so I'm just going to let them do their thing.
But it wasn't shoved down everyone's throat.
But now it's gotten to where everyone must bow. Everyone must bow. Everyone must do it.
Yeah.
And when people decide, hey, I'm a guy, I like a guy, then that's something where they could do that. But at the same time, everyone understood they're choosing to do that. But at some point, people tried to make it into, no, you must accept that they're doing that. We're like, well, I'm not going after them or saying anything bad about them. I'm just not participating in that. But now it's gotten to where a lot of things are being pushed, like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm a guy anymore. Maybe I'm something else. Oh, well, now I'm not sure if I'm a guy or a girl because there's like 58 million other options. And now I think that I can be a guy and I can compete in women's sports.
And cheat. It is cheating. It is flat out cheating. Because you're not good enough to go against men of your own sport. It is cheating.
Or I can go join a sorority. The thing on those things is, in that situation, that's potentially hurting other people. And then to say the science, follow the science does not in any way support that. If you look at your blood, you have 2 X chromosomes or an X and a Y chromosome. And that tells you who you are.
You either have an innie or an outie. That tells you who you are.
If you don't believe you're that, that's kind of an issue of how you believe about yourself and what you think about life. But if you're looking at following the science says you're wrong.
Yeah.
And that's fine. If somebody wants to believe that, and I don't think it's true, who am I? I'm not going to go after them and say, you can't believe that. But when they say, you have to believe it, you have to honor it, you have to raise it up on high, you have to lift your hands up in the air and say, praise those above who say that we need to recognize everybody's situation and embrace it and honor it. That is a religious cult. It is a religious cult.
And it's ruining people's lives.
It is. And because
people will not stand up and tell them, this is wrong. That's why you have a high suicide rate. That's why you have a high depression rate.
And
because it's sin and it's wrong, but people will not stand up and say that.
And if you're 35 years old and you say, I want to do that, hey, it's totally your free ability to do that. But if somebody's 9 years old, mom and dad, you are failing. You have failed as parents, and your child will probably reject you when they grow up. Because what you're doing is you're supposed to be the person to protect them, to guide them in life and all that. And I've heard that young kids are sometimes confused, although I've never actually seen that. I've seen boys play with their sisters and the Barbies. I've seen girls do other things. And that doesn't mean that because boys play with Barbies with their sister, when
wear a cowboy hat.
When their sister's like, play with Barbies with me, and you're like, I want to play with Star Wars figures. They're like, no, you're going to play with Barbies. Well, it's big sister, so she wins. That doesn't mean that the boy thinks he's a girl. Maybe he dresses in a dress occasionally when he's 3, but that's just because 3-year-old kids do that. If you as a parent say, this means this about my child, and therefore I am going to permanently remove parts of their body and give them drugs, then you are a child abuser.
You're a child. Yeah, it's child abuse.
And
flat out.
Those things, again, for adults, if they want to decide that for themselves, I don't agree, but they can do that. But when the rest of us are supposed to say, look how wonderful it is, we should turn the entire civilization for a small group of people that are in this situation. And we should teach all the kids at school that they should be confused and that there's honor in that, so that when they're not, they look for a reason to be confused about themselves.
It is a cult.
It is a religious cult. And you can look at it and say, well, follow the science. Yeah, the science.
There is no science.
The science is totally against it. And when you start seeing things that support that in hospitals and from the World Health Organization, then science has completely gone out the window. You need to investigate actual facts if you believe into that, not just what other people tell you. Because again, if you say, well, look at what the experts say, do you know what the experts are looking at? Do you know any of that information? You should go look. because you might be surprised to see what the actual truth is.
The next one is killing babies when they're in their mother's stomach.
Yep. It's a religious cult. Enough said.
Murder, 100%. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I'm sorry, but if it's my body, my choice for that, then that thing going around where you had to get that thing, why isn't it my body, my choice then?
But there are other things to consider. Okay, think about this for a minute. Okay, you're coming from a position of, I have my rights. I've learned this in school and everyone should. What if this terrible thing happens to some poor woman? But the reality is, those are all diversions. Like, just think about
That's a very minute.
Let's talk about science. Science is observation. Science is, you build a fire, you put your hand in front of it, it seems warm, you touch it, it burns you. You realize it's hot. Tomorrow you build another fire. Oh, look, the same thing happened tomorrow. Science, okay? So, with babies, we know mom and dad
do something,
and if nothing else is done,
a baby could appear.
A baby does appear. If the biological components come together, then a baby appears. It just happens if you don't do anything. So science says, at the point when those two things meet, that's when it's alive, when it's a baby, when it's a real human being.
And this is 2022. There is zero excuses for unwanted pregnancy now. I'm sorry.
Everyone can choose beforehand.
You do have a choice. Don't give me that baloney. You do have a choice. You have a choice beforehand to prevent that from happening. You have a choice beforehand. You're going to do certain things with someone who you are not married to. And then, oh, I got pregnant. Well, how am I going to take care of this by myself? He left me. What am I supposed to do? You have that choice. You have the brains to choose a guy who's going to be responsible and who actually loves you and cares for you enough to wait until you get married to do those things. God created marriage to protect women, to protect families. So it's your own darn tootin' fault if you end up in a motherly way and your boyfriend leaves you because you weren't using birth control.
And yes, he should be responsible. But you know what? In those situations, neither person is being responsible. But somebody is likely to end up having to deal with the situation without the other person being responsible. Then you should be sure that you make sure that the right decision is made at that time. He might not want to. He's a schmuck, okay? But the thing is, that doesn't mean that it's okay because you can just blame somebody else for the problem.
It was still your choice to do those things, and it was still your choice to do those things without taking precautions in the first place.
And so
you have choices.
And one other thing I was going to say on that is, science says those two, when a mom and dad do that thing, and then they end up, and it ends up that those two biological components get together, and then almost all the time it'll go on by itself and become a baby if nothing else is done.
You gotta love the sensors.
but before those two biological components are together, one is in the mom, one's in the dad, and no, mom and dad don't do anything. Those just go away on their own.
You have a choice.
So what that means is, prior to that moment, there is not a life there. After that moment, there is a life there. Okay, now you can say, I don't care. I just want to do my own thing. You can choose that. And that's fine as long as you say, I recognize that there's a person in there, but I just don't care because I was in the heat of the moment and I just didn't really care. That's fine. You can say, I don't care about that child. But it does, to me, seem kind of two-faced to say that, or to really aggressively push for your right to do whatever you want to that child because it happens to be contained within you, even though it is a separate human being. But then to criticize a woman who straps her children into a car and drives the car into a lake because she just doesn't want them anymore because she can't afford them. They're inconvenient to her. She didn't sign up for this. She got a husband that was a bum, and now she has to live with him the rest of her life because these kids are there. Why can't she make that choice? But other people can make the other choice.
Or you sit there and say how sorry you are this school shooting happened and how awful that is and how we need to ban these things that caused this.
So why are those children more important than other children?
They're not.
That's the same thing that racism is about. You're saying certain people are more valuable than other people because of the situation that they're in, and that's absolutely wrong. And it's not scientific, and because it's not scientific, if that's your position, you're in a cult. And it's a very strong religious cult. It's very strong.
Yeah. Okay, the next one, we're just hitting it hard today, so let's just keep going, dear. The next one is education.
Education. Wow. Education is important. People need to be educated. But education in our country is not education anymore. It's a cult. And here's why. People say you have to have a great job, and to get a great job, you have to go out and go to college, and everybody has to go to college, or you're lacking. It's like a basic human right that you should have to have college.
And they push it in high school.
And they really push it in high school.
Their whole thing in high school is to push you to go to college.
And when I was in the state of Kansas as a television producer, we talked to a lot of officials in the state government, and I found out that at that time, 70% of the entire budget of the state went to K through 12 education. That means educating people up to the 12th grade. 70% of the budget was only used for that. That means that roads, police, and firefighters, and all sorts of emergency services, everything else
30%
was 30%. But wait, there's more. 10% of the state budget went to college education, which means 80% total of the whole budget of the entire state was education. Now, even if education is important, that's a cult. Education is important, but the reality is we have really, compared to the rest of the world, our education is not very good anymore, and it's become more of a political angle. Okay, now, here's another thing. I heard
you do not need college to earn good money. That is proven over and over again. I will say, I think probably the majority of kids that go to college now, it is a complete waste of money. Complete waste.
It is.
Complete waste.
Well, especially since the majority of them never actually work in that field. But when they do work in that field, what kind of income do they make? Like, we've had people come to us and say, I have $200,000 in debt and I make $18,000 a year as a social worker. Well, social work is important and people need to do that. But I'm sorry, people shouldn't be applying for the job when you have $200,000 in debt.
This is a big one, teachers. I hate to say this, but it really ticks me off when I hear teachers whining about how little they get paid, which, by the way, my daughter's kindergarten teacher got $100,000 in salaries and benefits. $100,000 in salary and benefits. That's absurd. For a kindergarten teacher, are you kidding me?
Well, and good teachers are important.
But you should know when you go into college, if you're smart enough to get into college, you should be smart enough to know how much you're going to get paid with that degree afterwards.
Especially if your job is to teach people
if the return on your investment is going to be worth it. I get it. New teachers, the first 2, 3, 5 years, whatever, you probably get paid a lower salary.
But also, if you want to have a lot of money, maybe teaching isn't the best profession to get into. It used to be more that teachers were more people that had a burden desire in their heart to help people, even though they didn't really make that much money. Now, I'm not saying that teachers shouldn't get paid. Good teachers should get paid well. But there are a lot of teachers that really aren't that great.
No. We have had 5 kids in school for 20 years now, and I am not exaggerating. I can count 3 out of the over 100, it was like 125 teachers I counted that they've all had. 3 teachers that were excellent teachers.
Now, I will also say, I and all of my siblings had college degrees. And for the most part, I would say our degrees really didn't pay worth the cost of the degree. Tara has some cousins. None of them have degrees. And there's a point where after I was working in my professional field where the degree was as a department director, like one of the highest people in the type of production that I did, at the job, and her family members who were working in like as air conditioning people, doctor's office helpers and stuff, they were making more money than me with my college degree, and they had no degree. And at that time I was like, what was exactly the value of this degree? Also, when I got my degree, I was like, oh, I'm just going to follow along. Oh, they tell me this is going to be great. I'm going to get a job. I go through, I learned a lot of great things about television. You know what? I get to the end, I'm like, how do I get a job? I don't know. So I go back and I talk to one of the professors, and he says, just go out and get a job. Like, so there's a lot of money spent for me to learn how to get a professional skill, but it comes without the ability to understand how to get a job. Okay, so I eventually figured out how to get a job, worked 20 years doing that, didn't really ever make very much money. But her cousins, they made a lot more money with no degrees.
So tell them your story. You got to tell them the story.
So yesterday I was listening to a radio station, a Christian radio station, so that I find really appalling. They were saying, hey, you know, YouTube, your kids want to do YouTube. And
your kids want to be YouTubers.
And you're like, oh, that's kind of silly, but just let them have their fun and dream about that. But then the host said, but, you know, if you think about it, the top YouTuber in the world is a little girl who does like kid things, and she makes $28 million a year. Well, I don't really know that.
That's true.
If that
I think that is true. I think that is true. Yeah.
I would think that there would be some making more than that, but maybe not. But anyway.
Well, she's talking about kids, so.
But then she said, well, just think, even if you only made 1% of that, well, that's still $280,000 a year, which is a great little college fund for you to be able to go to college and get a job. And I was thinking,
what?
Did you miss the forest through the trees? Like,
how stupid can you be?
If your kid makes $280,000 a year,
work 4 years.
4 years, and they can retire at 12. So what I'm saying is, college is not bad. It's useful for things like doctors and lawyers and things where you need to have a really solid skill if the teaching is really solid at the school where you send them. But in general, it's a cult. People just have this idea, you have to go. And you know what? I was in college, and back in those days, almost nobody I knew exactly really knew why they were there. And they changed majors 8 different times. I'm sure it's even worse now. And when people don't have to pay for their own thing, and they just go and people are throwing money at it, it's a cult.
Yep.
If you throw money at your kid's college and you don't know what they're learning there, or even worse, you disagree with the politics that they're teaching your kids at the college, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for your child to go there, you are contributing to a cult.
Yep.
Yes. You're throwing sacrifices to an idol.
Yep. The next one is science. We already kind of talked about this with healthcare and the other things, but briefly.
The short version is, science is true, but
facts are true.
Facts.
Evidence is true.
But a lot of what's being called science now is not science. It's called pseudoscience, which is science fiction. There are things that you can look at numbers and you can say, oh, these numbers show that this is true. No, they don't show it's true. They show it's one possible way it could be true. Like if you have a bunch of evidence at somebody's house, you can say, this is a crime scene. A crime was committed here. Well, maybe Tara was just cutting chicken that day and she happened to cut herself up. The same things might show that, but you can't necessarily take that and prove the wrong thing.
Can't say there was a murder when Tara was just cutting chicken.
Science is where you build a fire, it burns you. The next day you build it again, you touch it, it burns you. It's science. But a lot of what's being called science is just people throwing ideas out there and other people saying, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, it must be true because it's believable. Or they said it in a convincing way. No, not believable. It's not science. It's a cult. There is real science, and real science is good and important, but most of what we hear about these days is not real science.
Nope. The next one is all about me.
Wow. Our culture in America, and probably the culture all over the world, but definitely in America, we are self-worshippers. Yeah. We are our own gods.
Yeah. Everything has to be about me. Everything has to be fair.
Everyone says, well, I think this. I feel this. Oh, it must be fair. It's all about me. And social media has made it even worse. It's always been there, but social media and the internet have made it worse because now you, or people, everyone out there, has this warped view of the world. And I do too. But we have a warped view of the world because social media feeds you what they think you want. And guess what? That means more and more stuff says everything I believe is right. Everything I believe is right all the time. And so because of that, you say things like, I don't feel that this is true. If people use feel words, it's definitely a sign that it's not actually real. And there's
Feelings lie.
feelings lie,
Life isn't fair. Suck it up, Buttercup. That's just the way it is.
and life is not about you. You can enjoy your life. There's nothing wrong with enjoying your life. But when you say, oh, the goal is ultimate happiness, it is impossible for a human being on this earth to be happy every single day. It is impossible. So it's fine to say, I want to have a good attitude. I want to try to have a good life. But if you're just all about that, it becomes the center of your existence. It's a cult.
Yep.
And if it's me, if everything I believe has to be what everybody else does, it's a cult.
Yep. Next one.
And following from that is politics. Oh my goodness. Politics have just become, people will kill their own family members over it.
Yeah, that's sad.
Over the Christmas table after just saying how much they appreciate each other. It's really, really sad how the politics has become. It used to be that people didn't agree with each other and we would say, well, I don't agree with you, but we're still buddies. But now I don't agree with you, so you must die, is kind of the attitude that people have. And people have been super, super polarized because they just identify with the party and they don't even understand necessarily what that party believes. If you just say, I always vote this way, or I'm always in agreement with these things, but you don't really know the day-to-day workings of what those people are doing, then you're just taking it by faith that party is doing what you think it's doing. It is your faith. It is not actually facts. Now, I look at things like, so there's a president who we recently had who's not in office right now, but who
should have been, but he's not.
I think he's a great guy, but here's the thing. There have been cult reactions from everybody on both sides.
Yeah.
On both sides. Although, at the moment I will speak about the people that want him to go away. Those people will do everything possible to make him go away.
How many investigations has this man had? And not one thing has been proven so far. Not one thing so far. In 6 years, almost 6 years of him being investigated by these people, not one thing has been proven so far.
Well, and I've asked people, why do you hate him so much? Because of all the terrible things he does. Like, which ones?
What has he actually done?
Well, CNN said something bad about him.
Well, he's mean.
He's just
He tweets
mean all the time. Guess what? Some people are mean. I don't know if you know it, but if you don't like him, your politicians have been mean for decades, and other people haven't done anything. So all of a sudden, when a politician that you don't agree with comes across as mean,
starts cleaning out the shop,
then he's got to go. He's the most dangerous thing for the world ever. That's just awful. People in his own party are going to say, I don't really like him because he's kind of not nice, and I want to cozy up to the other party. And so those people will do things that don't make any sense just because they've decided they absolutely hate him. It is a cult. It is a religious cult.
Now, on the other side, those who are pro our former president.
Now, again, I like our former president. And so I will start with that. But I will also say there are people who, to them, he's
not your savior.
He is the salvation of the world.
He's not the salvation of our country.
Or every discussion they have every minute of the day is about him. And if he comes back, perfection will come back to the world. And I think it would be good for him to come back, or at least his ideas. But he's not the center of the universe. He is not God. I like the man. But if you absolutely hate and despise the man and all you can think about is terrible things, the stress of you hating him is going to kill you at an early age.
And the stress of you loving him and always talking about it is going to kill you.
If you love him to the degree where you're willing to get rid of other people out of your life, the stress of that is also going to kill you. So you need to have a sobered idea of that, what that means. And to have it, you can have an opinion, but your opinion shouldn't be so extreme on either side. Now, again, I like him a lot. I think his policies are good, but if he doesn't get in, that's the way that God made it come.
And I find it interesting that the personal life of the dude that was just in, that's not in now, was such a concern to the other side. Yet when Bill Clinton was doing the same things, oh, well, they just do that.
Well, some things he was accused of. It's unclear exactly what that was, but many, many years ago, if it was true.
And it wasn't even in the White House.
That other presidents in the other party could do things in the White House while they actually are the president. And people will say, oh, that's okay, wink, wink. So if you can look at somebody and say, I heard a rumor that he did some things 20 years ago, and he must go, he's evil, he's awful, he must be out of there, he's the worst possible thing that could possibly ever happen to the world. But your president did things in the White House this year, and you say, I don't know what the definition of is, then you're a cult. It's a religious cult.
Your politics are a cult. If you're either way.
And the other thing is, a lot of what's going on is manipulating you. Like, people get to things like, equity and equality and all that. The majority of the discussions about those things lately are fabricated out of nothing so that political parties can take advantage of you. It's funny because when I was in television, I worked with a lady who we were out there it was back to the healthcare thing for a second. We were shooting video, and she was trying to tell the story that these people were in desperate situation because they didn't have any money and they needed free healthcare.
This is when they were trying to do the whole Obamacare thing.
And she told me one day, I feel kind of bad because I'm trying to shoot this video in a way that shows how poor they are, but I can't do it in a way that doesn't show their brand new cars and their big screen TV and their wall-to-wall DVD collection and all this other stuff.
Their pizza boxes, their huge things of Coke that they were drinking from the convenience store.
And I said, well, why is it that you think this is such a scary issue then? I said, is there anybody that you've met that you've seen has just died on the street because they didn't have health care? Well, no, but I'm kind of a bleeding heart, and I just can't stand the thought that somebody out there might have this problem. So what you're doing is you're going by your emotions with feelings about something that you don't have any facts about. You can't look at any facts and point to them. And when you act on your feelings with no facts, it is a religious cult.
And back then, all that stuff they bought, they could have easily purchased health insurance for $200 to $300 a month back then, before all the sheer stupidity of 2008 kicked in. You could have done that. They could have done that. And they easily spent that on all this junk. But they didn't. They chose to not have health care and instead have the big screen TV, the pizza boxes, the convenient store drinks, all of the DVDs.
And if you object to me saying religious cult, consider this. Religion is a thing that you believe and has a specific set of rules that people must follow in order to follow this religion. Yep. And that's different from faith in God, where God leads you to a relationship with him. Religion is a set of rules that you follow, and if you're obeying them, you're in, and if you're out, you're out. And a cult is one that just gets so out of control, there's absolutely no purpose behind it, but you do it anyway, and you would practically kill people in order to stand up for that.
A cult, when you have to follow certain rules and do certain things, that's a cult. And that's what all of these things that we're talking about have in common.
And next is the news. People say, I absolutely have to know what's going on. I have to watch the news. No, you don't. Because partly, none of it's true. It's funny because it was our past president said, fake news. Well, guess what? It's all fake.
And it's been happening
decades.
For years. You want to know, when we first came out with our Dining on a Dime cookbook, we sent out tons and tons of press releases. I mean, tons of press releases. Over 400 interviews I had, radio, television, newspaper. You want to guess what? Over those 400, 2 actually got the facts right. 2 actually got the facts right.
Yep. Well, and it's all fake. And it's designed to make you scared.
And to sell commercials.
So that you will buy things that their advertisers are trying to sell you. You are falling into a trap of, I have to follow this. It's like an addiction to crack, is that you're having to do it. You're being compelled to watch it, even though it never brings you joy. It never brings you joy, but you're having to go to it. You're worshiping it. It's an idol. And people say, I have to know what would happen if this doesn't happen. What would happen? That's thinking with your feelings again.
Your friends and family will tell you if a bomb goes off somewhere.
Something happens, you will find out from other people who can't get themselves away from the altar of the news. And if you think, my news source is more correct, because it's funny. I agree with a lot of people that the majority of news has a very specific political bent and that they're very focused on the mainstream, okay? And that's true. That's a really big thing. But Fox, a lot of the people say, oh, well, they're all conservative. No, they're not.
They're not.
They're not in
They're
any
not even
way.
close.
If you read the articles and you look at the actual words, there's a lot of stuff built in. There's a lot of stuff built in that says the same thing as all the other news sources. Or there are other things. I saw a thing yesterday. It said Bible's banned in this school. So I just happened to look, and again, I need to not be looking at it either. But I happened to look at this.
Well, part of that we do for research for the prepping videos.
But I was
so,
curious because the thumbnail, the picture they had, said Bible's banned, and it showed a Bible in a school. So I just looked to see. It's not banned. It was brought up for review. And, maybe somebody's going to try to ban them someday. But that's not the truth right now. And they are saying that. I look in there and there's a bunch of things that basically if parents say, I don't know if this really goes with the school policy, they review it. But then they maybe take some off and then they put others back. And the school themselves, even in that story, said, we're not going to do that. So even the one that you think is trustworthy is probably not. So I wouldn't watch news at all. It's a religious cult. You don't need to know everything. We were given a life, and that individual life, if you live your own life, and yes, vote when you can.
And do what you can and realize you can't control it.
Vote when you can about things that you know are facts. If you hear people say scary things, verify them before you decide that's what you believe. Otherwise, it's a religious cult. And if you don't know what you believe or why, you shouldn't be voting. You should know why those things are happening and what the actual facts are, as opposed to just what people are saying when you hear 3 seconds.
And what the consequences are going to be.
Yeah. So those are the top religious cults that you might be sucked into.
We could do more.
Pretty much everyone in America is guilty of bowing down to one of these cults, and sadly, a lot of Christians.
Yep.
So
visit us at livingonadime.com. We will see you guys next time.